Doning Lake dam breaks in Hunan, China province experiences massive flooding, causing tens of thousands of homes to be flooded damaged, roads, houses, vehicles, and bridges destroyed. The rushing water carries mud and soil, submerging everything in its path. This scene really makes us feel overwhelmed and helpless in the face of uncontrollable events. China's flood disaster is truly terrible and devastating, submerging entire villages and cities in the country. The situation makes me pray that they will soon receive the help they need to overcome the disaster. The roar of the volcano seemed to tear the sky apart, and the fiery lava flows rushed down like raging monsters. Black smoke billowed up, covering everything in an invisible darkness, making people feel like they were lost in a nightmare with no way out. The houses, where we once found peace, were now just piles of rubble, devastated by the ravages of nature. Lava poured down the streets, turning cars into shapeless scraps of metal, like a harsh warning of the power of destruction. Every time we saw that scene, our hearts felt like they were being squeezed. The fear was beyond words. Every time I looked out the window, I was overwhelmed by an indescribable fear. The flood was like a ferocious monster, roaring and sweeping away everything in its path. The old bridge that we once trusted was now just a harsh iron frame, unable to withstand the force of the fierce water. The water surface was murky, cloudy, and stormy, like a sea swallowing the entire city. The once familiar streets were now completely covered under the thick water. Vehicles, from luxury cars to ordinary motorbikes, were now just small pieces of debris, mercilessly submerged and swept away. Every means of transport became lost rafts, stranded or submerged under the vast water. The houses that we once called our homes no longer had any signs of safety. Water had flooded every corner, covering everything from the roof to the floor, turning everything into a giant sea of water, making it impossible to distinguish between streets and houses. The scene around us was like a tragic picture. Water flooded everywhere, causing all activities to stagnate. The authorities mobilized a series of vehicles to clear the water, but those efforts were only temporary pieces in this chaotic picture. Land and rocks from neighboring areas slid down, creating muddy piles that blocked traffic and made all roads difficult, almost impossible to move. My heart clenched when I saw this scene. Each drop of water rising was like a knife cutting into the fear that was growing by the day. There was nothing more we could do but wait, praying for the flood to pass quickly so we could return to normal life. With each passing moment, fear and helplessness rose, making us wish for a miracle to save the lives that were submerged in the ocean of floodwaters. It was terrifying. When the mudslide suddenly hit, our entire community was thrown into a nightmare. It was an unbelievable moment, as a huge amount of mud and debris poured down the hillside, crashing into our street. The rumbling sounds of the landslide echoed everywhere like the roar of an uncontrolled rage. Looking at the scene, a feeling of helplessness and fear enveloped us. We did not know what to do to deal with the destructive force of nature. The efforts of the rescue forces were still continuing, but in our hearts, there was only constant worry about whether we could restore what had been lost. Every moment that passed brought a sense of fear and uncertainty, wishing that this terrible thing would end soon so we could start anew. As the massive desert sandstorms began to approach, the sight truly left me shivering and uneasy. From the camera's angle, I witnessed a giant wave of sand rolling up, engulfing everything in its path. The once clear sky was now covered by a dense blanket of sand, like a sudden dark curtain descending. I felt the devastation of nature through my lens, and the feeling of dread overwhelmed me every second. The air was so filled with sand that everything seemed to become hazy, and visibility was severely limited. The surrounding areas were quickly transformed into giant sand dunes, and any signs of life were gradually erased. The sandstorms are chasing the cars, but a tiger is hunting. I felt helpless and terrified as I witnessed the devastation of nature. I recorded every dramatic moment, unable to help but feel the ferocity and brutality of the raging sandstorm. Every passing moment, it felt like we were just standing on the edge of a never-ending nightmare and just wished for everything to return to peace soon. A terrifying rumbling sound rang out, breaking the silence of the space. It was the sound of an avalanche, like a giant beast waking up from a long sleep. Huge blocks of snow began to slide down, sweeping rocks and trees with them, creating huge columns of white smoke. Thick, heavy snow fell down, like the wrath of Mother Nature, carrying with it unimaginable destructive power. A cold and nervous feeling spread throughout my body as I witnessed this scene of destruction. Like a giant monster waking up from a long sleep, the snow blocks suddenly rolled down the mountainside. They slid down at a terrifying speed, dragging along large rocks and small branches. The sound was like a thunderclap, echoing through the mountains and forests, making everything around them seem to tremble. The cold wind blew hard, carrying the breath of snow and sweat, making this scene unforgettable to me. In the chaos, the images of icy streams and snowflakes, like pieces of a devastating picture, appeared clearly. Everything happened so quickly, but in that moment, I felt the powerlessness of humans before the destructive power of Mother Nature. I stood on the deck, my eyes fixed on the vast ocean, where giant icebergs floated, sluggish like monsters from the depths of the sea. They carried the weight of centuries, like secrets that could never be untangled. But now, as the sunlight began to shine, I felt a surge of anxiety. Each giant iceberg, with cracks clearly etched on its surface, was slowly disintegrating. A cracking sound, like the sound of steel being bent, echoed in the quiet space. It felt as if the sea were breathing, shaking under the pressure of the giant icebergs. The waves rose, rolling violently, as if to protest against the invasion of the unstoppable heat.